Good afternoon, and welcome to some random ramblings on this Thursday afternoon, the 26th day of March in the year of our Lord 2020. I Our discussion was unceremoniously cut off last Sunday when some bozo made a false copyright claim. I was cut off in mid sentence and perhaps mid word, but I'm back now because I appealed and it took them 2 days to process my appeal, but I'm back now. I hope there's a copyright claim on random ramblings. Apparently, this other bozo on Sunday, now YouTube won't tell me who it was, but I suspect it was this person who thinks he or she owns a phrase from the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verses 9 and 10. So I'll read it to you. As I looked, thrones were placed. And the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. So you see, nobody owns the copyright on Ancient of Days. It's from the Bible, the book of Daniel. Now, some translators might own the whole Bible that they translated, the whole translation, but they wouldn't make a copyright claim just because I said Ancient of Days. And I hope nobody is stupid enough to think they own the copyright on random ramblings. These are common phrases that everybody uses. And I'm going to skip down to verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, the clouds of with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So here we have the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man. Daniel uses it twice. Ancient of Days, it's a name for God. Now, this is proposed as a prophecy about Jesus Christ, because after the resurrection, let's see, um, I'm a little slow today. Here we go. Matthew 28. Chapter 28 of Matthew. I'll get you that link too. Now, if you're listening on the replay, that's fine. If you're listening live, welcome. Matthew, verses 16 to 20. Okay, MAD. In case you want to look in your own Bible and not just go to the link, here we go. After the resurrection, and here we go. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. So here in Daniel, the Son of Man, which is what Jesus called himself, is given a kingdom, and all nations obey him. Here, Jesus is claiming that prophecy after he has been crucified and resurrected. Amazing. Well, anyway, random ramblings. I'm not afraid of a virus. I've had I've had most of them. You see, when I was a kid, you didn't get 29 vaccinations all at once. I had measles, mumps, chickenpox, German measles, shingles, strep throat, scarlet fever, um, even with, let's see, I'm typing, measles, don't take aspirin. So I had lots of bottled water and lots of lemonade and didn't leave my room except to use the bathroom. Because even though I was fine, I didn't want to pass it on to others. And last December, I had some kind of virus. I used to say that I had the flu one time in my life. It was either December of 68, but more likely January of 1969. People in my family, because I had a runny nose, but I wasn't bad off at all. And then I think I thought I had the flu last December. I isolated myself. I took care of myself, washed my hands often, sanitized all the surfaces in my home, and didn't have contact with other people because they don't want to get the flu. Well, maybe I'm thinking now because it was so severe, it might have been this coronavirus. But whatever it was, I didn't need the government to tell me to isolate myself. I didn't need all the stores shut down, all the toilets. That's what you do. But apparently, some people aren't quite that sensible. Do not take chances. This is a nasty virus. But don't panic either. It is not the end of the world. However, guess what? All the big corporations are getting bailouts. You know what small business gets? Government loans. I think this is I think they're not letting this crisis go to waste. They're using the opportunity to put all of us deeper into debt with loans for small business, with um, what do they call it? Oh, grace periods. You don't have to pay your loans for the next 90 days unless it's with took my little student savings account that I opened in the third grade at my school to save money for college education. They took it for service charges, a little child savings account. Many years later, the state of California made them give me $50. I don't know how much I'm not really thrilled with Citibank either. I have not done business with Citibank, but I never will unless they buy my mortgage. See, my mortgage is serviced by Select Portfolio Servicing Incorporated. They're not the lender, they just collect the money. And underneath that servicing, my home mortgage keeps getting sold to different actual lenders, and I don't ever know which one it is. The trust deed on my house just says Select Portfolio. Go figure. They don't actually own the loan, they just service it. Oh, and by the way, if you have a timeshare, please get out of it. Timeshares are a racket. They are not an investment, they're a liability. They charge you for maintenance, whatever they want to charge, and you have no say in that. And when you want to use it, oh, it isn't available because they've rented it out to a non member to make even more money. Of course, right now, short term rentals are supposed to be banned, but this will end. This epidemic isn't forever. Oh, yeah, it'll come back next winter. Well, so does the flu. And from what I've seen, the ordinary flu kills more people, maybe because we don't take precautions. But really, we should always wash our hands. We should always cough and sneeze into our elbows, or as I do, I carry a napkin or even a cloth handkerchief for sneezes and coughs. Don't cough into your hand if you can avoid it, but if you do, it happens. Immediately wash your hands. Don't make other people sick, even if it is just the ordinary flu or a head cold or whatever. And don't panic. Okay, we're low on toilet paper. Well, haven't run out yet, even though the stores have. But we get this in our junk mail. Mountain Shopper. Now, it isn't as good as the old newspaper that included rags in the paper and was much softer. But if you get it damp, not soaking wet, but damp, it works just fine. You know, if people were hoarding because they thought they could sell their toilet paper for $10 or $20 a roll, give it up. We are not going there. We have alternatives. You should have stocked up on booze, liquor, and apparently beer is quite plentiful, but liquor, hard liquor, is getting scarce because people with brains are hoarding it, thinking if this lasts long enough, they can sell it, and if not, they can drink it. But what are you going to do with 112 packs of toilet paper? That'll last the rest of your life, but where are you going to keep it? And then there's cigarettes. Well, there's no shortage yet, but there's talk of banning cigarettes so fewer people will die. Um, Actually, that will just create a black market, just as the ban on alcohol did in Prohibition, and just as the war on drugs did beginning in the 1960s. And ordinary people who are law abiding citizens will celebrate it as an alternative, but it seems to be worse for me than just puffing on a cigarette because I just kind of puff on it. The smoke goes in my mouth, and yes, it could cause throat cancer. But you know what? I don't climb rocks without a harness. I don't climb them at all. I don't jump out of a perfectly good airplane. I don't race my car on the freeway or even on a track. Got itchies. There are 100 things. I don't jaywalk. I'm really careful crossing the street. There are at least 100 things that could kill me more certainly and quicker than puffing on a cigarette. I've been smoking basically all my life because my parents both chain smoked, but I started buying my own when I was 15 and I'll be 66 pretty soon. I never had lung problems until the early 90s when I was working on an Air Force base right next to the runway. And frankly, I was afraid to light a cigarette because of the smell of jet fuel in the air. It's basically kerosene, highly flammable. And I started getting this cough. It was a weird cough. I just suddenly and stuff would, the mucus would come up. It wasn't like cough, cough, cough in the throat. It was coming up from my lungs. And when I quit working there, my health improved. My breathing improved. So we'll see. Frankly, if I get run over by a truck, my cause of death will be cigarette smoking because that's what they want you to think. Oh, cigarette smoking kills. Yeah, it does. But a heck of a lot more slowly than jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. A lot more quickly than some of these fools who go hiking in the wilderness alone. There's bears out there, there's mountain lions, and even a raccoon or a skunk can kill you. Maybe not right away, but they do carry rabies and the Black Plague and a few other nice diseases. Hmm, hmm. Well, anyway, um, I'm still here and not going away anytime soon. So I'll say it again. Ancient of Days. Nobody holds the copyright on it. Same with Random Ramblings. Now, there is a slight chance that the copyright claim was for exegesis, which happens to be in the dictionary and the encyclopedia. Exegesis is the process of explaining the meaning of a text. For example, the Bible, but not only the Bible. It can be any written or even spoken um, essay, short story, novel, textbook, whatever. Nobody owns. So once again, you cannot copyright Ancient of Days. You cannot copyright exegesis. And if you continue making false copyright claims on my YouTube videos and getting me booted for 2 days where I can't even start a new live stream, guess what? I will continue appealing, and YouTube will put a black mark on your account, not mine, because I am not violating copyright from something like the Bible or somebody else's book. I give the citations, I tell you where I got it, what page it's on, and who the author is, and I don't overstep. I don't read you the whole book or story or essay. I just give you an excerpt which benefits the author by sending you to get the whole thing and pay money for it. Oh, I don't need a blood thinner, Jonathan. I don't ever take Tylenol. That'll destroy your liver, and all of a sudden, all your blood cells will get chewed up. They call it a hemolytic disease, and it's irreversible. Now, if you happen to, sometimes the only allergy med I can get has Tylenol in it, and I'll take it once, but not every day, not more than once in a month or a year, because hurts or why it hurts. It's the inflammation, and Tylenol does nothing for inflammation. I learned that from my dentist back when I had teeth. Now my teeth sit in a cup in the kitchen until I want them. But yeah, he said, no, you take aspirin, not claimed copyright on something I said. Probably ancient of days, but perhaps exegesis. I was about to get this little book that belonged to Philip K. Dick, and where he got his some of his ideas in his exegesis. Now this little book, apparently A. Powell Davies is somebody famous as a scholar. I'm not up on that stuff. The documents that shed a brilliant new light on Christianity, the astounding story of the Dead Sea Scrolls with a scholarly interpretation of their relationship to the Holy Scriptures and the origins of Christianity. And the author A. Powell Davies, late, does that mean dead or previous? Pastor of the All Souls Church in Washington, D.C., was the author of many books. I guess he was dead then. And there probably was a hardcover. This is the paperback. Signet Classics. 20th printing. It's a cool book. And Phil kept it in good condition. Some of his books were torn apart. A mentor book. It cost $1.75 in 1950. Cheap Salem Light because, oh, here it is. What makes a light cigarette light is mostly the filter. And I can't stand lights, I'd rather just breathe. Anyway, Phil got some ideas about Albert Schweitzer and his view of Christianity. Schweitzer, I always thought he was like back in the Dark Ages or the 1800s. He didn't die till 1965. He was studying to be a preacher. He wanted to be a missionary, but he changed his mind along the way and became a doctor and served as a missionary. Schweitzer's view of Jesus, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to page 122 to pass up all the blah, blah, blah. Okay, the liberal scholars such as Renan appeared to have made considerable progress on an alternative view of Jesus. But this was interrupted near the beginning of the present century, so around 1900. The result of this interruption has not been to restore the traditional portrait of Jesus, but to make more difficult than ever the discovery in the New Testament narrative of any kind of portrait that is self consistent and meaningful to modern minds. Well, give me a break. Jesus didn't live in modern times. And the so called modern worldview is really drawn from the ancient, pre Christian Greek philosopher Epicurus, probably through the Latin poet Lucretius, who was like, I guess, around 2 or 300 AD. Most of what we know of the ancient Greeks is from quotes that the Romans, the Latins, uh, well, the Romans wrote in Latin, that they pulled from manuscripts that hadn't disintegrated when the Romans were around. Hi, Strontium. Yeah, well, apparently, either some bozo thought he had a copyright on Ancient of Days from Daniel chapter 7, or some other bozo thought he had a copyright on exegesis. You can even do exegesis on any book, story, anything written or spoken if it's long enough to explore the meaning, exegete. Now, see, this modern interpretation of Jesus is supposed to be an exegesis, but it's really an eisegesis, shoving the modern worldview, which is really the ancient Epicurean philosophy, redefined and shuffled around, imposing their own worldview onto first century Christianity. But it's back up now. It took them 2 days to process my appeal. I couldn't even start a new live stream until they processed it because someone claimed copyright. It was not AI, it was not a glitch, it was some human being being an idiot. Why is my phone ringing? Come here, phone. Oh, it's a human being. I have to answer it. Hello. No. Did Rocky take you the inhalers? Yeah, I didn't know I still had those, but I'm not going to need them. I still have two of the one I actually use. Well, there is one thing. My cat is out of treats. She like she likes Temptations. I have blue or green. I never remember what they're called, but blue and green. Okay, I'll see you in a while then. All right, thanks. Bye. It was an actual human being and one of my neighbors, and she's going to bring cat treats. Awesome. Hi, Lady Saga. You guys missed a lot. I was cut off in midstream on Sunday and not allowed to even start a new stream because some idiot claimed copyright either on the phrase Ancient of Days or on the word exegesis. So I'm constantly using those words in this live stream now that I'm back. I don't play music. I don't run videos. I just talk. Now, I have this here book, The Dead Sea Scrolls, which belonged to Philip K. Dick. And I was, let's see, on page 122 about Albert Schweitzer and how their modern exegetes, modern scholars are projecting their own worldview onto first century Christianity and saying Jesus is inconsistent, his story doesn't make sense. My water's empty, I'll be right back. There we go. Um, when people make false copyright claims, they get the black mark on their account. So, what goes out comes back. All right. The scholar who more than all others produced this hiatus was Albert Schweitzer. The hiatus in liberal scholars talking about the New Testament. Albert Schweitzer had a strong influence on Philip K. Dick's religious ideas and on his exegesis. In his monumental work, Von Reimarus zu Rede, in other words, from Reimarus's book to Rede's book, it's Wrede, Wrede, published in German in 1906 and translated into English in 1910 with the title The Quest of the Historical Jesus. He advanced the thesis, this is Albert Schweitzer's thesis, that Jesus was, in Jesus' own view, the Jewish Messiah who brought death upon himself in the expectation that it would result in a parousia. And there's a little footnote. The Greek parousia, a becoming present and arrival, used especially of the anticipated hour in which the Messiah would be seen to be such. Ah, or manifestation of himself as the anointed one of Israel. Well, that's what Messiah means. It's that's what Christ means. Christ is the how the Greeks translated Messiah, and Messiah is an anglicized form of Mashiach, Hebrew meaning the anointed one, as when Samuel anointed, but he failed. Mm. Mm-hmm. Today's comfort food is grandma's. Schweitzer's thesis was formidably supported by his rigorous appeal to the actual testimony of the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John is not considered synoptic. He insisted upon remaining with these documents, including all the eschatological portions of them. Oh, eschatology. Eschatology, if you look in the dictionary, it probably says, but I haven't got it solidly in my head. It's in one sense, it's the idea that the fact that the end has already happened in an orthogonal time, which Phil used to talk about. The end ending actually affects all the events leading up the eschatology as presented in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I'm pretty sure John isn't synoptic. Let me check. In order to keep the page marked. Yeah, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They stand in contrast, Wikipedia, in contrast to John, whose content is largely distinct. The Synoptic Gospels describe the same or similar events and can be compared. He, that's Schweitzer, insisted upon remaining with these documents, including all the eschatological portions of them, which the liberal scholars had decided were insertions made by the writers of the Gospels or by revisers of the original writings to make the Gospels accord with the prevailing eschatological ideas. Well, anyway, that's enough from this book. I don't want to violate copyright. Oi. Schweitzer concluded that Jesus was mistaken because Schweitzer thought that Jesus and his disciples, that is the 11 or 12, depending on whether you count Judas, that they expected all was wrong. His disciples were wrong. I'm trying to get the quote for you. Yeah, Matthew 24. Let me get the link for you. And verse 34. Truly I say to you, Jesus talking, by the way, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. I want the whole chapter. But in verse 36, but concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. Well, anyway, Schweitzer concluded that Jesus was wrong. Philip K. Dick concluded that since it hasn't happened yet, all the stuff in John's Revelation, which, by the way, had not been written when Jesus was alive, but was based largely on Isaiah and other prophets in the Old Testament. Phil concluded that since it hasn't happened yet, and Jesus had to be right, we must be living in the first century AD under the Roman Empire. He got onto that track by reading about Albert Schweitzer and possibly reading some of Schweitzer's own writing. I don't have a clear documentation of that. I have only conversations I had with Phil. So that's what I was getting to last Sunday when I was unceremoniously dumped. Let's go on with let's see, give you the whole chapter. I'm on verse 37. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. And Son of Man, of course, is what wanted a kingdom, and all the nations would worship him. Verse 38. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Now, I like the theories where people think that refers to Genesis 6 when the sons of God were marrying human women, the daughters of Adam. But it seems to me that it's more likely related to the verse in which the second coming will come as a thief in the night. In other words, people will be going about their business unaware, just normal human life. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake, and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Now let's back up to 40. Then two men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left. Two women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one left. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. Now, some people make a big deal about two men are in a bed and one is taken and one is left, and they talk about homosexuality. Well, I'm sorry, but it was not about sex. It was quite common, especially when it was cold in the winter, for lots of people to share a bed. And if the inn didn't have another room, you could agree to share a room and share the cost of a room at the inn. There'd be only one bed. You'd be sleeping in it, not, yeah, they probably need the water, but not like that. Well, God promised not to flood the whole earth again. He didn't promise not to flood the bayou or the gulf or any small area. Oh, I bet the green fanatics are actually happy to see that people are not driving and not flying and so forth. The air is cleaner. Flooding in China too. Well, yeah, China gets floods quite often. They apparently haven't done enough flood control, kind of like Northern California. The 3rd Street Bridge in Napa gets washed out by a flood at least once every 3 years. And they rebuild the bridge, but they don't fix their flood control. I spent a miserable 5 months living in Napa with my mother, the devil's sister, and my oldest brother lived there for a few years, so I got to hear all the news from people who were there and saw it. Anyway, on a mountain where the temple used